So I have advertised on my Instagram page and here on TikTok that I'm going to be doing a webinar and talking about negative overthinking and what that is and how to work through it and find a better, healthier perspective. Welcome. I'm going to get started. I've kind of prepared some notes that I'm going to be reading. Let's get to it. So, again, I'll be reading, so don't mind where my eyes are. So, tonight we're talking about negative overthinking and what are some things that you guys tend to overthink about. Think about that while, don't overthink, but think about that while I go through the stuff and let me know what you tend to overthink about most. And again, if you have any questions once I get through this, I'd love to talk to you guys about it. So, what is overthinking? Just as it sounds, it's thinking about certain situations over and over and typically attaching them to negative emotions or a pessimistic outlook. It's natural for all of us to worry at times, but how can you tell the difference between worrying and excessive overthinking? So many people, especially today, suffer from anxiety. And anxiety is caused by this need to overthink situations. People tend to overthink either about things that have happened in the past or things that have yet to happen in the future. And when we are focusing on things in the past, we might be trying to think of all the different outcomes and where we go wrong. Where did we go wrong and what could we have done instead, for example? And when we're overthinking about the future, on the other hand, we are worrying of what's to come, obviously. We find ourselves creating all these negative scenarios and all in ways that things could play out before they even happen. And you have to ask yourself, why? Why do we do this to ourselves? Sometimes really extreme cases, like when we're grieving or depressed, thoughts can become obsessive. And the more you continue to go down that rabbit hole, the more stressed and anxious you are going to feel. So there's two different things we see in terms of overthinking. There's ruminating and worrying. And ruminating is when we focus on the past and replay events over and over in the mind. Our emotions are attached to these thoughts, and the emotions that we feel when we're thinking of the past and overthinking there, regret, guilt, self-loathing, self-blaming. And again, this is very common and essentially the inner workings of depression or anxiety. So for example, if you're stuck on a situation like a breakup and unhappy how things turned out, you might be focusing on things like, I should have done this, I could have done that. And these feelings quickly turn into hopelessness and fear, stuff like that. So, some of the thoughts you might have are, no one will ever love me again, I'll be alone forever, what's the point, I won't find someone better. And, worrying, on the other hand, again, you're focusing on the future and creating negative outcomes for yourself before anything even happens. So an example here would be, maybe you're worrying about not getting the job that you want. So in your head, you're expecting the worst and attaching negative emotions to the situation, often, again, out of insecurity or self-loathing. So, I'll never get this job, they're going to hate me, what if I freeze in the interview, I'm probably not good enough, I'm not qualified enough, I'm not this, I'm not that, focusing on the lack. So, we could just as easily try to focus on what could actually go right, So again, why do we do this to ourselves? And before we get into the reasons behind this, I want to quickly talk about some of the negative effects of overthinking that is often overlooked. So the most obvious would be that we're causing ourselves stress and or anxiety, creating these scenarios in our heads. Our thoughts and how we view the world is literally everything. We create our own realities based off of our perspective and how we think we see the world and ourselves. We see sometimes the negative overthinking can disrupt our day and our routine. It can cause, our appetite to be ruined, and a lot of both mental and physical issues and illness. And a lot of people don't understand that every single cell in your body responds to mental stress, and it just really isn't talked about enough. How stress or trauma and a negative mindset leads to physical health issues as well. So what do we see when we are chronically overthinking about everything? Just looking at the word disease, for example, is dis-ease. Think about that. Not only do we experience negative effects on our emotional well-being, like feeling overwhelmed, frustrated, moody, easily agitated, poor self-esteem, feeling unworthy, having trouble relaxing or finding peace. From a physical standpoint, overthinking can cause all kinds of short-term issues physically, such as body pain, headaches, low energy, insomnia, chest pain, stomach issues, frequent colds or sickness, and unfortunately all that turns into long-term effects, which can be very extreme, like immune deficiencies, heart disease, high blood pressure, heart attacks, strokes, more serious gastro issues and diseases, eating disorders, obesity, menstrual problems, issues with skin and hair, sexual dysfunction and low drive, and things of that nature. So again, why do we do this to ourselves? Why do we spend our time overthinking? And ultimately, we've created patterns and habits for ourselves. And these go back a long ways. We've created our own habits and how we handle things. And these are actually started typically in early childhood. More specifically, if you've experienced childhood trauma, you're much more likely to overthink. If you experienced childhood trauma, neglect, or perhaps your emotional needs were not met as a child, it's pretty likely that you may still remain in a constant hyper-vigilant state. So we get stuck in the fight or flight or freeze response that we adapted to in childhood due to that trauma or stress that we endured, or neglect, or again, not having our emotional needs met. But this leads to our minds being in survival mode and high alert again, even still as adults, and we still get stuck in that same mindset. So when anything negative or slightly inconvenient arises, we actually have an automatic response from the subconscious mind. So, something happens and it's like, oh, I remember this kind of situation, quick, we have to react. And then again, you're choosing fight, flight, or freeze. So the subconscious mind is good, and it's really meant for our basic instincts. Like if you're an animal in the wild and you see a predator, your subconscious mind is going to alert you and tell you to get the heck out of there, because you've probably been chased before, and instinctual habit. Oh, gotta run, you know. So in terms of actual survival, the automatic response from the subconscious mind is actually very helpful, but most of the time, the situations that we're overthinking about are really not actually life or death situations, as I just described. So consider that most people are controlled by the subconscious mind nearly 95% of the time, which is insane, right? Like, just think about that. Absolutely insane. So this means that the thoughts that we focus on and the way we respond to situations and our behavior is typically just an automatic response based on what we have experienced in the past. Your mind says, oh no, stress, quick, here's how we deal with that, you know. But obviously, if we have endured trauma and are stuck in survival mode, as I was talking about, it's really not the best way to deal with the situation most of the time, you know. So if your subconscious mind is controlling you and you're stuck in automatically responding as you have in the past, like most people, you have to consider the fact that you're essentially in autopilot, you know. So you're not making your own conscious decisions. So how do we fix that, and what can we do? One of the best things that you can do for yourself is to practice mindfulness. So what is mindfulness? Mindfulness is being conscious or aware of something. When we think in terms of negative overthinking being correlated to the subconscious mind, we see that if we are reacting based off of learned experiences, we can't possibly be practicing mindfulness or consciously making decisions, which goes right back to the topic of being on autopilot, more or less. So if you're practicing mindfulness, you allow yourself the opportunity to observe the situation without judgment and give yourself that ability to make conscious decisions based on rationality and what is best for you in the present moment. That's the beautiful thing about practicing mindfulness, right? Is if you're overthinking, you're either, again, focusing on the past or the future, and mindfulness allows you to actually stay in the present moment, and that is where your peace can be found. So it definitely takes some practice to adapt mindfulness into your daily habits and routine, but the end goal here would be to practice consistent mindfulness. And again, it can be a little tough at first, like creating any other habit or trying to learn something new, you know, but it really does, truly does get easier and easier and easier as you practice. So the more consistently you practice, the more you'll see the difference in your mental health and overall quality in your life. So as a coach, I tell people that you can literally train the brain or rewire the brain, and this is not just wordplay, you know. With consistent mindfulness practice, you literally will see changes in the actual structure of the brain, and there's a lot of science behind this, and feel free to check that out. I always encourage everyone to do their own research, of course. So most of the time, the main issue is that we're not even aware of these thoughts and how they negatively impact us, right? So this is just how it is, it's how we operate, and if this is all you know and that's how your brain works, it's likely hard to even recognize that you're doing it in the moment and that you're overthinking. So again, really challenge yourself to practice the mindfulness and be consciously aware of what you are thinking about and putting your energy into. So thoughts will pop in and out of our heads, you know, at extremely fast rates, right? And we can't control the stuff that comes through. But while we can't always choose every thought, we can choose what we focus on and our perspectives of the situations. So again, maybe easier said than done, you know, But if you do put in the time to practice the consistent mindfulness, again, it will get so much easier to implement that positive change. So when we're living consciously, we have the ability to say, hey, I'm not feeling good right now. I'm stressed out, or I'm scared, or down about something, right? And our emotions are a gift and our first indication for us that we need to make a shift. So if you know you feel like crap, then you know that your focus is on something negative, right? So I understand also that life is full of challenging things. Trust me, I understand that all too well, but the way we choose to perceive things really makes all the difference. So even in the most challenging, difficult, heartbreaking situations, we can always, push ourselves to find something to be grateful for. And when things happen that are upsetting, it's not like you have to pretend to be happy and positive all the time. Feel what you need to feel it to heal it, as I say. But our emotions are also meant to be temporary. So work through things, reflect on them, and pay attention to where your focus is going. And practice that pause, like, oh, hold on, I'm feeling really upset. Let me pump the brakes here for a minute, Give yourself the opportunity to turn things around for yourself. And sometimes, we can just reach for one tiny little thought that just feels a little bit better than the last, So let's use one of our examples from the beginning. Like if you have recently gone through a breakup, or you're stuck in a bad place mentally, from a breakup long ago, You may think of something along the lines of, I'll never find another relationship as good, or I'm unworthy of love. Is there one tiny little thought you can come up with that can begin to shift that narrative? Like, for example, maybe things didn't work out because there's something better waiting for me. And in this specific scenario, we can focus on where we're going wrong. And if you're feeling unworthy or unlovable, then obviously there's a deep-rooted self-love or self-esteem issue to address, right? And it's unfortunately so common for people to struggle with their level of self-love in today's society. We're constantly compared to others and held to these impossible standards and whatnot. But I'm telling you right now, if you don't love yourself like you should, your main goal in life needs to be to correct that above everything else. Because no matter what happens in life, at the end of the day, you're stuck with yourself. You're stuck in your mind, and really need to be certain that it's a nice place to be. And I know it can be extremely challenging to develop self-love when we have none, But you will never be able to create peace or happiness, or even be able to offer others the right kind of love if you don't start first with yourself, right? So ask yourself if you treat yourself the way you treat others. Would you speak to a child that you love in the same way that you speak to yourself, with your own inner voice, right? Inside all of us is our own inner child. And inner child work is essential for the healing process, especially if you're someone like us who's experienced trauma or abuse or neglect as a kid. So remember, it's absolutely vital to take into consideration how you're treating yourself at all times, and to always base all of your decisions off of your own self-love and best interests. Life is too short. The most precious and valuable thing that we have is our time here. You never know when it's going to end, so don't waste it. Not like this, We only have so many hours in the day. What are you going to focus on? Worrying about the past or the future? is doing nothing for you. Nothing but causing you mental and physical stress, right? So if you made it this far with me, it's time for you to understand and make a decision to stop sabotaging yourself. You deserve to heal and you deserve to find peace. And along with practicing mindfulness, one last life-changing thing we can do for ourselves is to let go of the expectations we have in life and for life. Meaning how we expect life will play out, expectations for ourselves, for others, and everything else, right? So we often create these stories of how we think things are going to go and how they're going to play out, and when life decides to throw us a curveball, we panic and we become so devastated that things didn't turn out like they should have, right? But who says they should have? It's like, spoiler, life is always going to throw us curveballs, So we really have to let go of the attachments that we create with these made-up stories and our expectations. Of course, it's great to have dreams and goals and plans, but if things don't go as you anticipate, sometimes you just kind of have to throw your hands up and, yell, plot twists, just go with the flow, roll with the punches, So if you do want to learn more about letting go of expectations, I do have a workbook for healing and reflection. You can find that in my bio. It's on sale for only $5. And I also offer free online coaching consultations, which only take about 5 to 10 minutes of your time. And my one-on-one coaching sessions start at just $25. So please remember, you deserve to heal. You deserve to feel loved and protected and worthy. And it starts here in your mind. So thank you all for listening to my webinar. My name is Ashley. I'm a mindset coach. Thank you.